He's real, Fabian. He's the one who gave me these flowers. I'll prove he's real to you.
She huffed, pushing the oleanders in my face. They were beautiful, sure, but faded on the petals and looked off somehow, like they'd been ripped and put back together hastily. I'm just saying, I haven't seen him, and he never seems around when I'm with you, which is often, Nara, I said, between huge bites of my churro. It was lunch, and my mom had gone all out on the sugar-laden selection that'd make any 11-year-old's mouth water. It was the summer of 2002, and like any self-respecting preteen, I was exploring the world around me and doing so with my best friend, Nara. The day started out like any other. She'd come over around 10 while I was still sleeping, talk with my mom about her paintings, and then wake me up by pulling the curtains back and screaming the theme song to various shows at the top of her lungs while I buried my head under the pillow. On this day, she chose Ed, Ed, and Eddie with pitch-perfect sound effects, much to my chagrin. I'd relent, of course. Then we played some melee until one of us got mad enough to tickle the other into submission and grab a bite to eat before exploring the areas around our cul-de-sac. The difference in today's routine, though, was the introduction of Nara's imaginary friend, Captain Echo, a woodland creature that Nara insisted on her life was real. Nara was unusual. The sort of girl who made the best out of any situation she was in, turned it into a positive or, at the very least, a creative environment. She'd dye her hair bright colors, wear clothes she made herself, and draw her classmates with or without their permission. Not that anyone minded. She was such a free spirit that people couldn't help but endear themselves to her. That being said, she kept virtually everyone at arm's length, as if afraid they'd catch whatever weirdness she had within her if they got too close. That's where I come in. I don't know if it was my lack of social cues in second grade, or if she saw something different in me, but one look at me was all it took for her to introduce herself. And from there, we were inseparable.
Come on, I'll prove to you he's real, right now,
she said affirmedly, sitting up from the table and grabbing her hoodie, giving my mom a hug as she ran out.
Thanks, Miss D'Amelio. I'll totally marry your son one day and make food just as good for you when you're old and wrinkly.
I chased after her, kissing my mom on the cheek before she called back, "Stay safe! If he gets hurt, you can't marry him!" laughing as she closed the door. We ran as fast as we could to the trail behind the old church, slowing down for a moment partly to pay tribute, partly to see who would get freaked out first. There was an urban legend some kid's ghost lived there and haunted anyone who didn't show him proper respect, which, in this case, was apparently a bow or curtsy and a vocal affirmation of, "We see you, we acknowledge you, we remember you," before waiting for 5 seconds and carrying on. Naturally, one of us would spook the other during the 5-second interval and tear off down the path with uproarious laughter at the other's expense. This time, Nara taking the charge. Soon enough, the trail turned into little more than a small dirt line amid a sea of underbrush, mushrooms, moss, and insects. The trees in my hometown were beautiful and sprawling. The further you went in, the less light seeped in from the treetops. The sort of place that made it easy to lose track of time and placement if you weren't careful with your sense of direction. After a while, we'd reach the familiar signposts that helped us figure out how close we were to our makeshift hideout. It was a clearing in the middle of the woods we'd stumbled over at the beginning of summer. We knew it was safe to be ourselves when Nara screamed out her favorite curse word and nobody came running. Over the weeks, we made it cozier with a hammock, mini radio, a campfire, and some trinkets from home. It eventually grew to be our personal sanctuary, where we could sit and talk about anything that scared us in the outside world without judgment. I turned the corner, and she was already at the edge of our circular haven, scratching something into the stack of rocks adorning the forest's outskirts.
Captain Echo doesn't come if you don't do the greeting properly,
she said, huffing as she finished engraving something I couldn't quite make out, laying a piece of her hair in a Reese's piece as she stood up, hands on her hips.
He has very specific requirements. He told me last time that I couldn't bring him out if it wasn't done properly. Said it would upset the great tree, and he'd get punished.
I stared, bewildered. Was I seriously going to go along with this? We were getting older, and imaginary friends were never cool when you weren't far off hitting your teens. I watched as Nara stared confidently at a gap in the clearing, waiting for something to appear. Nara, come on, I began, frustration building that I'd even thought for a second that something would happen. She held up a hand, waving me off, fixed on the clearing.
Shh, he'll be here in a minute. You just need to be patient, dingus. You two are gonna get along so well.
Then why have I never seen him before? Why did he suddenly turn up to you one day and now he's such a big focus of our time together? I stared down, kicking a rock. It feels different now. I don't get it. She shrugged, the wind picking up and the howl ripping through the trees, amplifying to a tenacious level and giving their voice more power, as if warning us of something.
He just did. I don't know why he only turned up a little while ago, but he was very specific that I didn't introduce you until I could promise him you were trustworthy. But he'll know that you're a good guy. The best.
She sighed, repeating,
The best.
Again. My frustration was getting the better of me. You and I are the only ones here. We've told each other everything. You don't need to pretend he's real for me. She spun on her heel, face a mixture of confusion and hurt.
Why would I pretend he's real for you or anyone?
She glared at me.
Fabian, all I'm asking is for you to wait a few more minutes. He will meet you. I promise.
Before I could reply, a snapping some distance away caught my attention, and we both looked back at the clearing. A shape was emerging from the darkness. Hands with thick, black nails gripping into the dirt, and veins popping as they pulled the lanky frame into our view. When it was 15 feet away, it reared back on its legs and towered over us, staring intently at Nara. My head barely coming up to its distended stomach. Deep lacerations, old and new, covering the torso. Mushrooms and moss firmly attached to the shoulders, and so deeply entrenched I could swear I saw life germinating on its surface. The back was covered in thick brown fur, and the head was the skull of a bear. Charred black with white indentations and markings similar to what was on the carving Nara had left. The eye sockets had been hollowed out and 2 black orbs hung behind them, peering through the mask. He was both fascinating and grotesque all at once. But the thing that caused me to fall back was the realization that Nara wasn't lying. This was Captain Echo. Nara ran forward and gave him a huge hug, wrapping her small arms around his torso as best she could, but failing spectacularly due to the monstrous frame of the creature. Still, it displayed gentleness and mechanically lifted a hand up to pat her head, as if unsure of how humans showed affection. Nara, what the? I spluttered, my throat rapidly growing dry as my mind tried to comprehend what I was looking at. My vision blurring as rationalization failed me miserably. Nara let him go and pulled me to my feet, punching me in the arm playfully.
Told you he was real!
She scoffed, throwing her arms out animatedly as if presenting him on a game show.
Captain Echo is our new forest friend. He doesn't speak much, but now we have someone to show us this place when we don't want to deal with the outside world. Isn't that great?
In a way, it was. I was part of something so secret and wonderful that I couldn't help but be caught up in it. I laughed, walking over to Captain Echo and held out a hand. "I'm Fabian. It's good to meet you, Captain." He stared at my hand, tilting his head to the side before grunting and grasping my hand with dirt-filled fingers and giving it a shake. I looked back to Nara as she gave me an encouraging thumbs up. "Why is he called Captain? Does he have an army too?" I asked, wiping the dirt off my hand as he sat down, legs tucked in, and stared at the sky.
I don't know. It's just the name he came with, I guess. I don't make the rules.
She laughed, looking over at him.
He just is, you know? The kids at school will never understand, but who cares about them? I have you and the captain now. That's plenty.
She smiled at me, and for a moment, I felt the world fall out from underneath me. Then the captain burped, and we both fell over laughing. Our summer continued in that way. The ritual at the beginning of the day remained unchanged. Wake up to a prank, play Smash, eat lunch, make vague promises of marriage to my mom, stop by the church, pay our respects, and head to the Haven. But from there, we would enter a world all our own. Captain Echo, in his own strange way, would show us so much of the forests, how the trees talked, the way the insects lived and died in their own huge struggles for survival, the right kinds of berries to eat, watching strange animals I'd never heard about in school as they went about their day. It was mesmerizing, and yet I can only remember figments of it now, some 17 years later. Memory is a funny thing. When the summer came to a close, we said goodbye to the captain and promised we'd be back by spring. He bowed and crawled back into the deep of the forests as our lives continued. Trends would come along while Nara and I focused on our own world of comics, video games, and Nara's increasingly vivid drawings, many of which getting her attention around town for their true-to-life design and otherworldly elements interlaced with ordinary scenery. A young girl hand in hand with a huge goblin as the world crumbled around her. A small boy sitting on an endless row of stairs that led to nowhere as a disembodied hand reached out from the corner. And her most revered piece, a huge burning oaken tree with branches containing human pods, each one in a different emotional state as they reacted to the burning forest around them. At the center stood a glowing figure, arms dug deep into the ground as thick tendrils spanned out and into the far reaches of the painting, infecting it all as it went. A black and red sun hanging overhead providing a macabre backdrop to such a painting. It was beautiful, sure, but something about it was off. Nara looked more tired than usual. Her energy had been slowly dipping since the summer ended, and I hadn't realized how extremely until we got to the new year. It'd been 6 months since we said goodbye to the captain. And while I'd felt fine, Nara was wasting away. Her once flushed cheeks were sallow, hair unkempt, and her demeanor was so devoid of joy. I asked her about the painting, and she exhaled as if the last of the world's oxygen was leaving her for good.
I dreamt about it every night for a week. I guess I just had to get it out of my system.
She shrugged, bags under her eyes, and absently eating her lunch. I was beginning to worry.
I think I need to go into the forest again. See Captain Echo. I think I've been away too long.
That's fair. I'll come with you. Maybe we can look at some of those weird monkeys again. I smiled encouragingly, but she didn't return the grin.
No, I'm gonna go alone. I'll let you know when we can hang next, okay?
She grabbed her things and gave me a short kiss on the cheek before heading out. I remember sitting there for a minute, hand on my face, affirming that was real, while also dealing with the knowledge the person I trusted most in this world and valued above all others, even my mom, had just disconnected from me entirely. I wasn't a super mature kid, but I knew that I couldn't just leave her and let her drift away. I grabbed my things, and knowing it was too late for her to go after school and that she'd want to go when undisturbed by time constraints, waited until the weekend. It took no time at all, on a particularly sunny day, to catch up and reach the clearing, where an exhausted Nara was sat on the floor, knees to her chest, and staring at the same clearing, as always, shaking. "Hey, goofball," I began, startling her, but not gaining her full attention as I tentatively stepped forward. I know you said not to come out, and I'm really sorry I didn't listen, but I just..."
You really are an idiot, Fabian D'Amelio,
she said, her voice broken and shaking.
"You'd follow me wherever I went, even if I told you what was happening, wouldn't you?"
I stood, my stomach in knots, and a hot feeling coming over my face. I hated seeing anyone upset, most of all Nara. "Of course, that's what best friends are for. I'd never stop following," I said, trying to inject enthusiasm into my voice and hoping it wasn't obviously forced. She sniffed, wiping her face with her sleeve and getting to her feet as the crunching from the dark returned once more.
"Fabian, I didn't want to say goodbye. That's why I wanted to come alone. And..."
She looked nervously over her shoulder before snapping her eyes back to mine, taking a step towards me.
"You can't follow me where I'm going next."
I was confused. I swallowed and tried to ask why, but no words came out. She fumbled with her hands and continued.
"I've been coming out here more and more in secret. He keeps calling me in my sleep, in my dreams. It's gotten to the point where I'm having full conversations with him that made me realize..."
Her eyes welled up as she took another step to me and put a hand on my face.
"That this world isn't for people like me. Not really. He has this place all on his own that I can stay in forever. All I have to do is let go."
I didn't understand. This wasn't Nara. This wasn't the girl who pranked me at every opportunity. The girl who drew beautiful but comical and abstract art for amusement. The girl who sang her heart out, whether she was on her own or surrounded by strangers. This wasn't my Nara.
People change, Fabian. But I changed too much. Meeting Captain Echo was the point where I knew I would never be welcomed here again. I held out as long as I could because I couldn't bear to leave you behind.
She forced a smile, crushing with those next 5 words as Captain Echo reappeared, howling as the trees swayed heavily in the wind.
"You are my everything, Fabian."
I didn't know what else to do. I was 12 years old, and this was uncharted territory for anyone. I pulled her into a hug, told her I'd miss her. What else was I going to do? It's not like I could fight the captain, and I didn't want to upset her more than she already was. We held each other for what felt like an eternity, before she pulled away and kissed me once, wiping a tear away before taking Captain Echo's hand and walking into the darkness. As I sat there, crying, I waited for hours for her to come back, but she never did. Defeated, I walked home, and no sooner had I gone through the door, my mom pulled me into a tight hug, sobbing. "Oh, my sweet boy, are you okay? Where have you been?" She was holding me so tightly, and while I'm sure my crying had set off alarm bells, this was still a bit much. "Ma, I was in the Haven with Nara. We were..." I began, before a voice behind my mom cut me off.
Where is she now, Fabian? Why isn't she here with you?
It was an older man, in his late 40s, smartly dressed and oozing with authority. The kind of guy you knew wouldn't have an issue with raising a hand to you if you stepped out of line. Nara's father.
I swear if that stupid girl has gone off exploring again, she will regret it.
She's gone, Mr. Anisha, I said, flatly. Mr. Anisha summarily broke the calm that was in the home, grabbing me and shaking me as he screamed for her whereabouts, my mom pulling him off of me. She went into the woods. She said I couldn't follow her. She said she belonged there, I said, emotions now rushing through me as I raised my voice at him. What was I supposed to do?
Be a man and go after her. She's your best friend, isn't she? Or are you just like every other boy going after my stupid daughter? She's gotten herself into this mess, but you should have protected her instead of being a spineless coward. If my daughter is hurt in any way...
He reared forward again, fist shaking as my mother screamed at him to calm down or that she'd call the police. She's not alone! The room fell deathly silent. Both my mom and Mr. Anisha stared at me. She's with our friend. I thought he wasn't real, but I met him, and he's harmless, I swear. I felt desperation overtaking me as their faces fell from shock to abject horror. His name is Captain Echo. He's a spirit of the woods, and I didn't get to say any more than that. My mom ushered me up to my room and told me to stay there until she came back, no matter what. Over the next few hours, I'd hear angry voices, crying, screaming, and a lot of chatter from people I didn't know coming and going. She came back the next day and told me I had to answer some questions, but that it would never be spoken of again afterwards. I protested, but she shot me a glance full of such terror that I dared not challenge it. The next few months were a blur. I was out of school for a while, and even when I was there, I didn't pay attention to the teachers who looked at me with a mixture of concern and disgust. The kids who hid from me like the plague, as I was the one who got Nara killed, and the world felt bleaker for it. I stayed in my room, the days blurring together until I just stopped checking altogether. It was eventually decided I needed a fresh start, so I was moved out of state to be with my relatives before I started the next school year. It took some adjusting, but ultimately, it was the best thing imaginable for my mental health. The events of that summer, though painful, became easier to deal with, and I could move past them. At the beginning of the year, I decided to go back and visit my family for a few months. I'd lived with my aunt and uncle for most of my teenage years, and I relished the time I got to spend with my mom. While it was nice, and we reminisced on my childhood, it naturally didn't take long for the subject of that night to be brought up, and now, as adults, discussed. Do you remember what Nara called the thing in the woods? She asked me, a glass of wine in a shaking hand. I nodded. Yeah. She said his name was Captain Echo. I didn't know where it came from, but that just appeared in her mind. Mom shook her head, biting her lip. Honey, the area you explored as kids is called Echo Forests, because the farther you got in, the more your voice would carry from so many directions. It was a great hiding spot, and you could practically go in there undetected. Nara never came up with that name. It was already there. She had a phenomenal mind for creativity, but that one wasn't on her. I stared at her, dumbstruck. But what about the captain part? The way he looked and all the things he showed us? She finished her wine with a swig and pulled out a newspaper clipping from the 1980s, sliding it over to me. The attached photo was of a small boy sitting on a set of steps on an old church porch, smiling at the cameraman. The headline next to it reading, Young Artist, 10, Vanishes. Last seen entering Echo Forest. I clutched it, eyes reading it over and over again as my mom put a hand on my shoulder and carried on talking. You probably heard about it growing up, but there's an urban legend of a boy who went missing in the old church, and that he haunts the building. This is that young boy. He was a genius painter, and right as he was getting attention, he vanished into the woods with someone. She sighed. I refused to take my eyes off the photo. Nara was also a gifted painter who vanished into the woods with someone. But it wasn't a forest spirit. It wasn't a goblin, and it wasn't something otherworldly. Honey, it was a man. A very, very sick man. No. She was right. I'd pretended for so long that he was a forest spirit or a friendly entity that I didn't notice the way his hands ran through Nara's hair. How he told us about a magical place deep in the woods where we could stay forever and Nara could be free of her cruel father. The strange foods in the forest he'd force us to eat so we'd lose track of time and consciousness. I pushed it all down in my mind and convinced myself he was something more. Did they find him? Or Nara? I croaked, my mind rushing with thoughts as uncomfortable truths came to the surface. My mom shook her head. Then how the hell can you know all this? I cried. She gave me the kind of motherly smile that conveyed so much pain and pity in one single moment. You were so alone after she went missing. All you did was sit by your window and look at the forest. You wouldn't eat, wouldn't sleep, just sat there night after night drawing in the sketchbook Nara left behind. You refused to let anyone touch it. But when you finally passed out, I looked and saw you'd drawn that thing staring into your bedroom night after night, sometimes with Nara and sometimes not. I decided there and then we'd move you out and give you the life she couldn't have. She held my hands in hers, tears running down her face. We couldn't save her, but I could save you, baby. I hugged her, overwhelmed by all of this and not sure what to make of it. I told her I was going to bed and that I'd talk to her in the morning. But sleep eluded me, and I decided documenting this for others may be worthwhile. Because if I just believed her when she said she had an imaginary friend that was only in her mind, maybe she wouldn't have stumbled across Captain Echo. Maybe we would have been together, and that sick fuck may have lost a victim he wanted to capture. Or maybe, just maybe, there's something lurking in our forests, in our seas, our mountains. Ancient, unknown things we may stumble upon one day and decide how to respond. Nara chose acceptance, while I ran. All I know now is as I finish my thoughts and put an end to this, my old bedroom window is open, and I can remember why the forests have their name. Why I'm venturing out there tonight to find the truth in all this. I can hear the howling of the captain calling out to me. And now my mind turns to the ritual we used to use for the ghost by the church, the bow and the affirmation. My mind lingers on Nara for a moment before bowing and getting ready to head out. I see you. I acknowledge you. I remember you.